Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Calling Within podcast. Today I have a lovely guest with me. Her name is Gia Lulic, and Gia is an author and also a content creator in a spirituality and self-development field like me. So Gia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Veronica. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I'm honored. It's going to be such an exciting conversation.
Oh my God. So excited for this conversation. I could talk about this subject for hours and hours.
We're primarily going to talk about the subjects in your book, which is called A Joyful Journey.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about how to overcome limiting beliefs and really get in touch with our true nature.
Mm-hmm.
And my first question to you is, why did you decide to write this book and what is your book about?
So this is one of the really hard questions for me to answer. The first part being, why did I write the book? I basically had moved to London and everything that I wanted had happened for me really quickly. So I literally came to London and within the first week I had a job and a flat, and both of those things found me. And when I moved into that flat, a whole series of random things happened again without me having to do much. And it really left me inspired to write a book about following your inner calling, following your intuition, giving a voice to your intuition, and really trusting that. And that when you do that, then you don't need to spend as much time fighting with life and trying to make things happen and having a kind of head through a wall to break through mentality. And little bit by bit, I would get a theme, I would think of a theme, I would write it down, and then before I knew it, there was chapters and chapters of themes. And then the book sat there for a while, 3.5 years, and I gave it to one of my colleagues. And before that, I gave it to my brother, and he was like, you have to publish this, it's amazing. And then I was kind of like, oh, but he's my brother. You know, of course, he's being nice and he's biased. But then I gave it to my colleague when he was in hospital and going through some health challenges. And he immediately called me and he was like, you have to publish this. And I just went on this self-publishing journey, which actually the best thing about this whole journey of self-publishing the book was that all the theories in the book are reflected in the way the book came about, which is, again, very effortlessly. I met my editor when I was out at a pub with friends. My colleague's amazing wife, who's a graphic designer, volunteered to do my cover. I had a picture taken in Notting Hill when I was writing the book of these cherry blossoms, which I gave to her to include on the cover because everything happened in Notting Hill. And then, of course, I had the book launch there. And they're the first bookshop that stocked the book and promoted it for me. And so, yeah, that's a very, very long answer to the way it all happened. But like the book says, everything about writing this book was pretty spontaneous and there was not that much grinding and hard work involved.
Wow, I love this things effortlessly. I'm sure for a lot of people, they're going to question it and think, is that really a thing? I'm actually used to working hard and grinding and hustling for something and chasing something. But actually, sometimes things can find you and the circumstances somehow are perfect around you. You don't even know why. Mm-hmm. And really, my personal opinion probably on this is really that's your testament to your connection to the above, the source, your true self. And
absolutely,
it's probably also kind of a confirmation that that's what you needed to do. So I think that's so beautiful that you got in touch with that and you listened to that calling. Yes, I need to write the book. Everything is telling me to do it, and you actually did it. So I think that's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's kind of like the green lights, that the book by Matthew McConaughey, which essentially is that if you follow your dharma, your purpose, your inner calling, there'll be just green lights. And you know when life is when you're not supposed to be going down a certain path, because life will just just shut the door on me.
That's what I'm doing with my podcast. Trying to follow this dharma and expecting green lights.
And you're amazing at it. You can tell.
Thank you. So let's go into the kind of questions around the book then. And I really want to jump into this question of beliefs and specifically limiting beliefs. What do you mean when you say a limiting belief, and how can we recognize that the belief is indeed limited and is not in touch with who we really are, is not serving our true selves?
This is such an important question. I actually just did an episode on this because I came to a new kind of understanding about our beliefs and how they shape our reality. So in my book, there is an exercise for people to actually identify where their beliefs are coming from, because it comes from the premise that beliefs shape our reality. What we cannot be capable of more than where we set our belief. So this concept of what we believe is going to be the most important thing in how far we can go with manifesting any desire. So the way that we can tell whether a belief we have is standing in our way is if we think about something we want, and then sit down with a journal and a pen and think about what we think is stopping us from getting what we want. So let's just say, like a classic example of, you want to do podcasting. So you've decided it, you've sat down, you're like, right, let's try and map this out. And you think, and suddenly a flood of objections come up. Where will I get the money? Who am I going to interview? How am I going to get people on board? What's my theme going to be? So you start to get all these objections to this fantastic idea that you've had. And you can actually start to write those down, and because those are your limiting beliefs. So those are the things that are going to be standing in your way. And that's one way of discovering what our limiting beliefs are. I used to think it was important to identify where the beliefs are coming from, and sometimes it is. But I think what's more time efficient is to actually just identify the belief and then work to overturn it. And the way that this, just to touch on the beliefs again, I think what you were saying about things just coming to your life without you having to do anything, those are things we don't have limiting beliefs to. So if there is a desire we have and we have no resistance to it, no limiting beliefs about it, it will quite literally manifest within a week or a month. Where we have a desire, where we have a lot of baggage, a lot of limiting beliefs, we have to take action around these specific desires. Because in our mind, to prove these limiting beliefs are false, we're going to have to see it somehow reflected in our external environment. So again, let's just use the example of, you've sat down, you want to do a podcast. You might have to watch a few YouTube videos to show you how other people are doing it, to tell you what equipment you should be getting, how much you should be spending, how you can reach out to people, how you can get people on board with this idea. And then in that process, because you're taking that action, you're actually now, that belief has closed a little bit. You now feel a little bit more confident that you could do this. And so there is this whole, with the law of attraction and the movie The Secret, there's this whole theory that we could just be sitting in our room, wishing, visualizing, thinking about things, and they just come to us. And they can. I have experiences where quite literally things knock on your door, or you get called, like the first job I got in London, I don't remember applying for it. I'm sure I did at some point, but I can't remember it. But some desires, which I'm still working on myself, there is a lot of limiting beliefs which I have to overcome through a process of action that I need to take around that.
Wow, there is so much in what you just said, and I really want to touch on a few things. So in terms of actually actioning on things to kind of go closer to your goals, like for example with the podcast, you want to do a podcast but you think I'm not good enough, or for example I had this thing like I don't have any qualifications. I'm not a yoga teacher. I don't have like a meditation instructor certifications or whatever. Who am I? Who's going to listen to me? I'm just this curious mind interviewing different people. I had this. And then when I started kind of actioning and starting out the podcast, the way how I looked at things is I'm showing the universe that I'm serious about this. I'm showing the universe, yes, I want this so much that I'm actually willing to take the step despite my limiting beliefs to actually do this and to become this podcaster, to even have this kind of energy circling back to me in the form of views, in the form of partnerships, sponsorships, etc. So that's kind of how I looked at it, but I never really thought that like, no, this is actually me proving and stepping kind of towards overcoming this belief. I never really looked at it this way, so I think that's really cool. And I really want to kind of touch on the sort of the beliefs shaping our reality piece, because I remember I was listening to this lecture about subconscious mind and how things are manifested. And I think there was a person in the room that said, I always think that I'll like get a cold once or twice a year. Like that's just always what I think, because I've been told this from TV, from relatives, from friends, whatever. And funnily enough, I remember this person saying, and actually, I always get colds once or twice a year. Whereas some people think, oh, you know, colds are normally just, you know, flooding like some places, but they're not near me, and they never get sick. So I always found this interesting how this internal belief is manifesting. How can we actually like reprogram ourselves to manifest a reality differently to what already is? So we have the limiting belief part, but what actually else do we need to do rather than change the belief and start actioning on it?
Such a great question. And you know, not I don't know that I have like a really kind of sure answer to it, because I'm still working on this myself. But I think over time, because I've been, for example, meditating for nearly 10 years now, you become acutely aware when you have those, you know, when you have that hour where you sit down and you start to kind of not try to silence the thought, but observe the thoughts. You really get a gist of like how ridiculous your inner voice is sometimes and what it latches onto. And so when you become more sensitive to your inner voice and looking at how it goes on tangents about random things, then you can actually pick up on these kind of that voice coming in saying you shouldn't do that, and you become very good at kind of just saying thank you very much, but we're doing this way. So it's really giving your higher self a voice. This is how we overcome these limiting beliefs. It's really about, and I talk about this in the book, there is our physical self and then there is our divine self. And the more we exercise our intuition, the more that's going to be driving our actions, driving our decisions. And the more we'll be able to recognize those limiting beliefs and just just be able to say, no, we don't think like that anymore. So for example, for someone who's used to, and this is such a true thing, this is such a thing, like I know so many people that actually have really ridiculous like because I'm from former Yugoslavia, and they have these like, I don't know, they have these things that they say like there's this thing like draft gives you like a bad neck or something. I think that's only like present in I think it's Japan and like maybe the Slavic countries. I don't know.
Russia, yes.
Is that a thing there as well?
Yeah.
It's just the most, and my mum actually does get she literally gets a sore neck. I've never gotten a sore neck from a draft ever in my life. And there's just all these stories that actually happen to people. But when we become sensitive to this voice, when we can actually hear it and distinguish it from, when we can realize it's not necessarily true. Just because you have a voice in your head, just because you feel a certain way, it doesn't mean it's true. And I think something really interesting as well is that our intuition is not like a naggy mother. It doesn't, that's the other voice. It doesn't keep repeating things to us. Intuition is like this very silent whisper that comes to you when you're feeling really relaxed. You just feel a surge of joy and you get this idea. That's intuition. And it's usually something that is not within your routine. And so many people get this and so many people ignore it. They get this several times a day, this idea of like, yes, but because it's a whisper, it's not going to keep repeating it. It's just going to say it once. People ignore it and they kind of listen more to their monkey mind, which is, the routine driven. Of course, as humans, we thrive on routine. We thrive on, things that are familiar because they keep us safe, and there's something to that. But I think safety, this is a whole other theme. Safety is you don't grow where it's safe. You have to, I love what you said about demonstrating to the universe that you're serious. It's by taking action when we're not ready. It's by going into those unsafe places. That's where growth happens. And that's this intuition is usually the voice that tells us to do something outrageous.
Wow. And just like from experience, again, using like my journey with podcasting, so freaking uncomfortable to do it when you're not ready. But I just realized for me personally, there was never going to be a moment when I was going to be ready. Mm-hmm. I was never going to, I could have studied all the religions, all the spiritual traditions in the world. I would probably still find an excuse not to do it.
Yes, I so love that. And actually, it really does take a certain type of person to do that, because it's not just being brave. It's actually getting yourself to do it. And it takes courage. It takes embracing the fact that you might fail completely. It takes, you're putting yourself out there. It takes courage to put something so close to your heart out there where people can criticize it. I think that's incredibly courageous, and it's so inspiring. So inspiring.
Thank you so much. I have to ask you, what is our divine self?
So I come from the premise that we are all divine beings who comes from the one source, and we're individuated versions, and we're literally here to play. But when we come to play on this earth plane, we have a blueprint. We have themes we want to explore. We have a certain thing we want to experience. And this is our divine self. So our personality is something that is built through our conditioning, that is built through societal norms. But our divine self is the thing that lights us up. It's the thing that gives us true purpose, true joy. It's the real driver of extraordinary things in our life, extraordinary paths in our lives. And there are people who stay with their human self for the rest of their life, and they have glimpses of this, but they never really realize it, because we have that choice of free will. We can realize our divine purpose, but we don't necessarily have to. We can, and maybe, I don't have all the answers. Maybe some people are here just to, we're here to experience different levels, but I think we all have a blueprint, and that's what our divine self is.
How do you actually know whether you're getting in touch with your divine self? Because I'm sure ego will play a lot of tricks on you. It might convince you, actually, I don't know, getting this done is really what your divine self wants. It's not the ego that wants to fit on these unhealthy things, but it's you need to nurture this soul, thing or whatever. It's going to come up with a lot of things. How do you actually know this is actually me truly getting with my divine self?
It's an amazing question, and it takes a lifetime of, doing this work to know. But I think the meditating, the catching out that voice, because the voice in your head that tells you should have a donut, you should have that 5th glass of wine, it's usually the thing that makes you feel bad after, and it's usually repetitive. It keeps saying it and saying it and saying it, and you keep hearing it, and it comes back to that. From every different angle, it'll tell you the same thing. Whereas your divine self is not like this persistent, annoying voice. It's very calm. It's very it gives you peace. I think your that divine voice, when you follow that action, you get peace as a reward. And I think the more you do it, the more you realize the distinction, and the more you intentionally try to recognize which one is which, you get better at it. But it's very tricky. It's definitely very tricky because, after 3 glasses of wine, everything's like a joyfully good idea. Do you know what I mean? Everything seems like, and it is definitely a tricky thing, but you do get better at it.
And just like a clarification on the terminology front, when you say the divine self, do you really mean like the soul, the atma that's within us?
Yes.
Okay.
So the divine self is like the soul, the kind of the thing that I love this topic because it feels like that part that really, there's this knowing we all have. But when we try to give this knowing some sort of like container or personality, or we try to give it just doesn't work, because it's the essence of who we are at our very core. It's the thing that, when we're in our meditation and we're completely quiet and we're observing, that's that feeling of complete peace and silence.
Wow. And so I think you might have answered this question already, but you talk a lot about kind of finding yourself. And in the book, would it be fair to say like finding ourselves is getting in touch with our divine self and living the purpose that divine self has on this earth?
Yeah, exactly. So the book, the kind of subtitle is A Guide Back to the Wild Self. And it is, we come here with an essence, we're children, everything makes us happy. We kind of like bounce in and out of emotions. And then we get conditioned, and then we become these very kind of predictable beings. You know what everyone's going to do. And I think for me, even at the age of like 12, I was literally so confused. I was like, how are we all such characters in our own right, but we're all doing the same thing? That always fascinated me. I just never understood that. And I think the book is really about stripping away that conditioning and re-finding our essence, and actually reinstalling that belief back in ourselves, because a lot of us don't really believe in ourselves. We don't trust ourselves. And I think, just to tie back to your point about starting a podcast, I think one of the things that happens when you do things like that is you gain respect for yourself, don't you? You suddenly trust yourself, you respect yourself. You're someone that you rely on, someone that in yourself, you feel safe. You feel like you can depend on yourself to do what you say you do. So to go back to that, how do we overcome limiting beliefs? It is building that trust. It is going out and doing things and building that trust, so that relationship with yourself, so that you don't betray yourself.
Wow, I love that. And I really think betraying yourself is, for me, I've really discovered this when I noticed kind of abusing myself with things that a lot of people might not really consider as abuse. Like, I think when you tell yourself that you're not good enough, that's already an automatic betrayal. Because what you're saying is, I don't have the capabilities to become good at something, which is so false. Like, we can be good at anything. You just need to be patient and put some effort into it, wait for the universe to give us some help, perhaps. Like, when you do things like that, it's really such a betrayal. And I don't know, would you treat your child or your best friend like this? Probably not.
100%. And that's why so much of the book is really about identifying those things that we do. So there is a chapter about take inventory of how you speak to yourself. And, would you be speaking like that to anyone else? And if you did speak to someone the way you speak to yourself, what would they say? And it's really about, I think awareness is so much of the initial work. Once you gain the awareness, it's a whole other stage of work. But the awareness is really key, because that realizing that yourself, you're betraying yourself, and realizing actually these voices are not true. Just because they're there doesn't mean that's who I am. Yeah.
Wow, so powerful. And especially like what you said about recognizing what your monkey mind says is not true, like because we're conditioned to think that what we think is true and we identify with our thoughts. Whereas but I really like the kind of the yoga perspective on this. Like I think somebody told me like thoughts are like clouds and you look at them and they pass by. But no, what we do is we hold on to the thought and we identify with it. If I say I'm not good enough, that must be true. That means I actually am not good enough. Whereas if we take a step back, we might say, I am unconsciously experiencing a thought that I am not good enough, which really is not true because inside of me, I am a divine self that is all capable and all blissful. But really what it is my societal conditioning that's coming out. Thank you very much for this thought. You probably will make me a better person long term, but I don't have to listen to you. So much power there.
So much power. And it is one of those things, like, even for me, even after experiencing so much grace, even now I have to, because the monkey mind is there to keep you safe. It doesn't want you to move forward because it doesn't know what forward is. It doesn't know what's waiting for you on the other side. So it tries to do everything it can to keep you in place. And I think the process of recognizing that voice is like an everyday thing. You have to train that muscle every day, because one little incident and suddenly you're back there again and you've forgotten everything you've done, and suddenly you're identifying with everyone in front of you, everything in front of you, and you can't remember that intuitive self at all. So it is a muscle that needs to be trained. It's a lifetime thing. When people are like, I'm there, there is no there. There's no there. It's just an ongoing process of getting better and better, of being, like you said, like in sync with yourself, like with that knowing.
100%. And like if you think about training this muscle, think about how many years it took for you to acquire limiting beliefs. Day by day, you are brainwashed, you're programmed to think, I'm not good enough, somebody else is better than me, X, Y, Z. So really think about how much power and time it's going to take to unravel all of this, bit by bit, bit by bit.
100%. And another thing I talk about in the book is you have to look at your environment. You have to look at who you're asking, who are you going to for advice? Who are your standards of practice, of conduct around you? Even like I talk about in the book, where sometimes if you want to start something new, interacting with family is not helpful because they'll keep seeing you as that little girl, and that's not helpful to your growth. They might say to you, you'll fall flat on your face. We don't want you to fall flat on your face. It's coming from a place of genuine love and concern for you, but that's not going to help you grow. So in the book, I also talk about, think about, how, like, are you able to expand past the group that you're in? Well, how's that going to feel for you? Are you going to, is that actually keeping you in your place? Because it's really hard to break away from some people or a group who are close to you. Our main, as humans, we want to belong and we want to feel psychologically safe in a group. But if we're in a group where no one's doing anything, it's going to be really hard to break out of that. And then I go into finding people who have already done way more than you have, so that you can aspire to something. But even just being around people who are way down the journey than you are is actually going to make you level up. Just psychologically, those limiting beliefs that you have around what you're capable of, just by being around people who have already done it, you're going to psychologically level up, and you're going to bypass all of those need to eliminate your beliefs, which is another answer to your question about how to eliminate limiting beliefs. Go hang out with people who have already achieved what you want to achieve, because then you will, on a very subconscious level, level up. Yeah.
Wow.
and be like, if these are my friends and all 10 of them have done this, why not me? And you will get there. Yeah.
I think it's also like you're going to see people that have put your desire or your limiting belief into practice. Like if you think I don't know, can't become a millionaire. And then if you suddenly are very close to being a millionaire or whatever, and then you hang out with a bunch of millionaires, so you're going to be like, oh my God, that's possible. Like,
Yeah.
I can do it to, like, as you say, leveling up. And you will probably also pick up kind of some psychological cues or maybe certain things
100%.
from them. And I think they also say like you're an average of 5 people you hang out with. So you'll just bring up the average.
100%. 100%. And I love what you say about picking up social cues. You start to take on the mentality of people who are that abundant. And I think there's something about as well, I discovered like through my own journey, what you feel comfortable in is what is now a part of your identity. So for example, like when I first launched my book, I've had mad like imposter syndrome because I was like, I'm not a well-known author. I don't really have any real, societal credentials in this field. What right do I have to be here? But then I kept going to all these book launches and I kept getting familiar with the space. And by the time I had my own book launch, I felt at home. So you have to get comfortable in the places where you want to be, because that comfort, if you feel comfortable somewhere, it means that's now a part of you. Another hack to overcoming the limiting beliefs.
And it's also, I think, quite relevant for manifestation because I remember listening to Impact Theory with Tom Billy and Lizzie Billy. I don't know if you know them, but they're also fellow colleagues and podcasters. And they were saying when they were, they still didn't really make much money. They were still in their business. And I think they were going to Hollywood Hills, which is like a fancy kind of area in Hollywood where all the celebrities live. And they were just like looking at houses because they wanted to live there at some point. And they were kind of like getting comfortable in there. So just by them going into the neighborhood, kind of almost matching their vibrations with the neighborhood, for them it became like a normal thing, like, oh, actually I'm in Hollywood Hills, or in your case, actually I'm at a book launch. That's a very normal thing for me. I can do it. My body is in alignment with those vibrations, with those people, and you're, again, in my opinion, bringing those desires into reality. And you're showing the universe, actually, hang on a second, I'm blending with the vibrations of this reality that I want to create.
Yes. It's like putting yourself in like really cold water, and it's really uncomfortable at the beginning, and you're just like, I just want to get out. But then if you just give it 2 minutes, you'll climatize and then you'll feel comfortable. And the minute you feel comfortable in a certain environment, it's like all those subconscious things just kind of start to melt away, which is, it's so crazy how much you can shift. And it's also really useful to think about how you've shifted, how you've changed your mind about things to see if you've shifted your beliefs. I think that's really powerful to look back on as well. For you as well, starting this, like, how has your mind changed about certain things? It's really powerful to look back because you're like, I've managed to override all of this, all of these limiting beliefs.
Cool. So we've talked about intuition quite a fair bit, and I'd really kind of love to get your take on why it is so important to listen to this intuition. And I'd really also love to kind of expand on what actually is the intuition. So we've spoken about this kind of like subtle whisper, but what actually, like, where is this intuition coming from?
So the intuition is our inner essence and knowing. And it's this blueprint that knows exactly where we should be and what we should be doing. And so it is not the voice in our head, it's the everlasting presence that has been here with us since we were 3, and that essence is still the same. So that's what intuition is. It's the divine part of ourselves that's non-physical. So yeah, the essence, I would say, that's how I would describe it. But the intuition is an incredibly powerful and playful part of us. It's playful. So the way we hear intuition is when we're playful. And there's a line in Elizabeth Gilbert's book, The Big Magic, which says something along the lines of, it's only when we are at our most playful that the universe can get serious with us. And I actually, in my book, I have an exercise called Follow Your Feet. So walk outside and literally just practice acting on intuition. So walk outside, am I going left or right? What's the first thing that comes left? Am I going there or there? And literally just completely let your body take you somewhere. I have had these, I've done these experiments, and if I told you where they led me, it would literally, you'd be like, no, that could not have happened.
Where? I have to ask you now.
So I've got one of my favorite stories about that, doing that exercise, because I'm so lucky I can take one day a week to do that. So if you can take a couple of hours or a whole day, for people who have children, maybe not a whole day, but if you can take a couple of hours to do it, just watch where your intuition takes you. It's always somewhere where it's a little bit mind-blowing. So for me, my favorite example of this was I ran into Jay Shetty's wife at this bakery. And again, that was really spontaneous. I was walking past this bakery. I never get bread from there. I was like, you need to get bread. I was like, okay. I now know when I'm asked to do random things, it's because I'm supposed to go there. So I'm like, okay. And I'm standing in line and I look and it's Radhi. It's Jay Shetty's wife. And I was like, oh, should I come up? I had my book with me. I'm like, I've been watching them for so long. I know she lives here, her family's here. Should I say hi? I walked out and I called my colleague and I was like, oh, Radhi's in this bakery. And he's like, you have to come up to her and say hi. And I was like, no, I can't. And then I went to work the next day and he was like, what happened? He was like, surely you've done all these things. Surely you could have come up to someone and said hi. You watched their podcast. Surely it's not that hard. And he's like, why are you're not even following like your own advice? And I was like, don't worry. I'm going to be in a room with Jay Shetty in the next 2 weeks. And he was like, right, okay. Good luck with that. Literally was like, yeah, okay. And then that very Saturday, I was visiting my friend to go for like an adventure. And I was meant to meet her at like 1:30, and I decided to just follow my feet. I was like, let's see where the day takes me, because I wake up at like 7 a.m. So I'm like, what am I going to do till 1:30? So I was like, I'm just going to just follow my intuition. And I was walking past the big bookstore in Regent's, oh God, what's the street next to Green Park?
Piccadilly,
yeah. I was walking there because I love Green Park. So I was walking there listening to my music, and I'm walking past and there's a massive picture of Jay Shetty and it says like book signing today. And it says 12 o'clock. And I look at my watch and it's like 11:30. There's no line. And I called my best friend and I was like, oh my God, can you get my book? Because I wanted to give him my book. So I was the first one in line. And I met some people there in the line as well, which was so synchronistic as well. And then got to meet him and like I took a photo with him, signed my book for him. He took it. And then just sent it to my colleague and he was like, oh my God. Because he was so confused. But like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, it's crazy. I didn't know he was in town. I didn't know what was happening. But because, again, I had no resistance to this desire, I was just like, whether it happens or not, I don't really care. The universe was like, well, there you go. It was just like a little bit of a wink. That's how I see these things. But definitely, if you try doing this, and you will see that your instinct will take you somewhere. You'll find that dress that you've been wanting, or I don't know, you'll run into the person that you've been wanting to run into for a long time. Like something will happen. And then once it happens, and this is just one of the many stories, once it happens, you learn that your intuition is so intelligent and is so powerful and knows how to put you in exactly the right place at the right time with the right people. And you're like, how did it all come together? Yeah.
That's incredible. Wow. And I'd love to kind of also touch on this resistance part, because I think that's very important. Mm-hmm. Every time I had a desire, but I was incredibly attached to it. I was like, ugh, if this doesn't happen, I'm going to die. My world is going to be flipped upside down. Like I was holding on to things so much. Never happened. Mm-hmm. As soon as I let it go, as soon as I'm like approaching things calmly, I'm like, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, I'll live with it. Mm-hmm. It happens every time. Similarly to you, like, why is this when we let go of the outcome, things start manifesting?
I think because we need to be at the same frequency of our desire. So when we're in that constricted feeling, we're not on the same vibratory level as our desire. And so we are actually closing it off. Because if you think about a person that's open, they're kind of like open. And you think about a person that's closed, it's like they are completely contracted and they are actually blocking, and we've all had those. I mean, that is such a classic thing that happens to everyone, isn't it? You want something so badly, and then the minute you don't care, it's like, oh, hello. And you're like, well, where were you like 3 days ago when I really wanted you? So yeah, I think it is the whole like vibration, vibrationally incompatible with what you want. And I think, and that's why, coming back to the playfulness, I think when we're playful, we are in that sweet spot of like joyful and not really caring about outcomes, which is where the magic happens, in my opinion. When you're playful, when you're joyful, when you're having fun, and when you're completely present in the moment, which I think this is why your podcast as well, I'm sure you found when you're working on this, it's like you are completely present and you are in that state of, I'm doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. And that's where things happen.
The thing that just came up to me, which I think came from my intuition, is if we hold on to our desires and we're like, this has to happen, we're mistrusting the universe.
Exactly.
Whereas if we're like, I'd love to have XYZ, I'm confident this will come at the right time. Meanwhile, I'm not going to stress about this. I've got other things I need to do. You're in complete trust. You're like, I know the universe will give it to me. That's it.
Yep, you're in that. And you're in that abundant mindset. You're in trusting, you're abundant. You're like, if this is something that's of service to me, that's one of the things that I've started saying. I'm doing a little bit of a surrender experiment, like that book by Michael.
Oh my God, can I just tell you something?
Yeah.
I was literally thinking about bringing it up for like the past 10 minutes.
Wow.
I was just waiting. I was like, oh my God, this is so surrender experiment. I have to mention it. Hilarious.
That's so funny. Yes, so I actually was talking to my other best friend who's like a breathwork instructor. And I was like, I don't know what my theme is for next year. And she's like, more surrender. And I was like, oh my God, it is. And then I started listening to his book. And I, again, it was like that. It's such a thing, isn't it? When there's like, it's like a whole other level to surrender to life minute by minute, because and just everything that comes to you or doesn't come to you, say to yourself, if this is in service to me and my purpose, it will happen. If it's not in service to me and my purpose, it will not happen. And I have this affirmation that says, it's kind of written like a poem, but it essentially says, let the power within sweep out of my mind everything that is not divinely planned for me. So then when things don't come about or they don't work out, I go back to that affirmation and I realize that must not be my highest good for this to come about. So, I've dodged a bullet. And I think if you take inventory of your life and if you think about all the things that didn't happen for you and you thought about what if they did, most of the time you'd be like, thank God, thank God I didn't end up with this person, or thank God I didn't get that job, or, you realize why it didn't happen for you.
Wow. And I have to mention for the listeners that never heard about this surrender experiment, it's basically about this man, Michael Singer, he's an author, and it's essentially talking about how he decided to give up his life to the flow of life.
Yeah.
So he essentially just kind of started going with circumstances and with his intuition as opposed to listening to his monkey mind. And incredible things had happened to him. It's a beautiful book, and it basically made him a millionaire. It kind of created a spiritual community around him, and it just... Yeah, it's a lot of wonders in this book. I'll leave it to the listeners.
Have you read it?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I only started reading it. That's so crazy. Because such a random book as well. I only started reading it because my friend was like, you should read that book. So I was like, I'm going to do it. That's so crazy. I think that book as well reiterates how much our personality can be in conflict with our divine purpose. Because he talks about, and this is something that's really useful to recognize as well, like you might think that you want certain things, but actually your soul is not craving that thing, and that's not what's going to give you peace. The classic example of people like becoming rich and famous and then being like, oh, this is not what I wanted. It's your personality wants certain things, but your divine self is actually creating something different. And I think that book is such a testament, because he was kind of fighting it the whole time. His personality was fighting like all these things unfolding the whole time, and he really had to hold back. And I think I don't know what it's like. How do you surrender? Do you practice that?
Very hard for me. Very hard.
Yeah.
I do.
The hardest thing, right?
Yeah. Like, for example, with this podcast. So many reasons were in my mind why I should not be doing it. People are going to judge me. People are going to think I'm crazy and woo-woo and not logical and whatever. This is not what I studied for. How am I going to make money for all those things? But there was this deep calling, which is the reason why I also called my podcast The Calling Within. There was just like this craving, this itch, this calling. No, dude, I don't know. I still don't know why, to be honest. But I'm just, again, surrendering to this calling. And yeah, I guess I practice it also with things that don't work out for me, even though it's difficult in a moment. But I catch myself and I'm like, okay, like, maybe it's not meant to be for a reason. I'm just going to surrender to this. Life is too short to stress out about some small thing.
100%. I think it becomes such a liability to give anything thoughts that are not energizing, because I think something else that I've realized is, on a very practical level, our attention is just so malleable. So even if you're worried about something, you could literally in that moment just say, what am I having for dinner? And then try to think about what you're having for dinner and try to imagine what ingredients you need. Where do you need to go to the shop? Like, even if you just do that practical thing of turning your mind to something that's not emotionally charged, you actually see how quickly your brain just like diverts to something else. Our mind is just so, it's like a child. If you just if you get it to come here, it'll come here. So I think when you realize how easy the mind is actually to control, and you practice, then it becomes easier to align it with that divine self. And once those two start to act in synchronicity, magic happens.
So what is this divine purpose you're talking about? I assume the way how we get in touch with it is by surrendering, by getting in touch with our intuition, by listening to our intuition. But can we actually arrive at a point where we kind of know what this divine purpose is, why we came on this earth?
With the divine purpose, it's such an interesting one, because I don't know, and I say this in the book as well, I don't know that we all have, I think we have themes to explore. And I think the way that we can tell whether we are in alignment with that blueprint that we came is because we feel peace. We feel an overwhelming sense of peace and joy. We don't have to be bouncing off the walls, but we feel peaceful. We feel we don't hate ourselves. We are at peace with who we are. We are comfortable in our skin. And I think when we feel that, when we feel at peace with life and the world, it generally means that we are living out this thing. I think there are some of us that have come like yourself. You've got something to express and share. And I think, for people who are gifted, I think that is your duty to be sharing that. And, when people are like, why are you out there doing this? It's like, well, and actually for everyone, whatever your calling is, if it's like to plant a really nice garden, like you need to do that, because if you're not, you're actually depriving the world of that light that you have. And that is being, that's kind of being stingy in a way, and you're not being very generous with life, and you're not being generous with yourself. And yeah, what do you think about purpose?
So many things to say. It's been a bit of a quest recently, especially as I've been having a career crisis and kind of an existential crisis and asking all those questions. Why am I here, etc. I think there's a couple of things that I would consider my purpose. Number one, because I'm spiritual, might not be true for everyone, but it's to evolve spiritually. So get in touch with my true self, my Atman, my soul. It's for me, become self-realized, enlightenment. That's kind of, a part of a lot of Eastern philosophies. So again, part of spiritual progression. I also think for me, it's motherhood and becoming a mother, bring like a child in the world. And also like career-wise, I guess it's serving people and serving humanity and doing this out of true intention. So like with this podcast, I really want to kind of contribute to a societal well-being and educate people. So I think everyone's purpose is different. I probably, again, because I'm spiritual, I think there are some kind of universal purposes, like the spiritual progression. But
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, I still don't have it figured out, to be honest. Like I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years' time I discovered 10 different purposes for myself. Who knows? We'll see.
I think our kind of divine or essence is very uncontained, and that is the point, that actually could take you anywhere. And I love what you said, how this is what's right at this time. Where it's going to take you is like, I think your only job is to enjoy this and to just stay open to where it goes. Yeah, I think that's the fun of it.
And what's your purpose?
My purpose is definitely to show another way of kind of the antidote to what we've been taught, which is the grind, which is stay in your lane. I think I'm here to show that actually we are this. I'm here to talk to the divinity in people, to talk to someone and actually help them to discover a different side of themselves, help them to discover bigger possibilities for themselves. And I think I've always loved doing that and pointing out that essence to people within themselves and that true power. And it's something that, as we talked about before, it's for you because it gives you energy. It doesn't take energy away from you. It's the thing that charges you and makes you want to do more, as opposed to draining you and making you want to hide out in your room. Yeah.
Wow. And what it is you're working on now?
So I actually, interestingly, started working on another book, and then I thought it would be so much more fun to actually interact with people and get their take on all of these ideas. So I've got a YouTube channel that talks about principles in my book, but the YouTube channel is really a real-time journey of my own discoveries and insights. And I would love to know what your experience is. I think when you're on this when you've given yourself an intention of, like for me, I want to put out a video every week about a new insight that I have, you just keep getting insights. It's like the universe is like, here's this one, and here's this one, and here's this one. And I'm at a point where I'm getting so many that I just want to keep the videos turning over. So yeah, if you want to kind of follow that journey, it's if you type in Gia Lulic on YouTube, it will come up. But do you keep getting inspiration? Is that what's happening with you as well?
And the podcast?
Yeah, for the podcast, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the universe is sending me guests my way for sure.
Okay.
I've been, quite busy for the past 2 weeks. As soon as I came to London, I booked like 4 guests in 2 days. It was like very random. And then another 4 guests in like 2 days. So now I'm like all booked out for January. So clearly this is like the universe telling me, do it. And it's also like, I'm so blessed and grateful. All those guests are also super diverse topics. So a lot of things are coming and it's very exciting, and I am inspired by the people such as yourself to just keep going, to keep trusting, to keep working, that something will work out. But it's busy, but it's a process in itself. It's a very kind of steep learning curve, and for sure a lot of insights are coming my way.
Oh, fantastic. It's so nice to hear because like I said, it does take a lot of courage. And it's so nice to meet someone who's like on a similar journey. So thank you so much for having me.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure. And I know you've mentioned you have a YouTube channel, but for others who are interested, where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram under The Girl Loves London. And yeah, the YouTube channel. I'm on TikTok as well. I'm still trying to get my head around how to like sync everything up. But yeah, YouTube is probably my main platform.
And your book, Joyful Journey, is also on Amazon?
Yes. So my book, Joyful Journey, is on Amazon. You can also get like a signed copy from the Notting Hill bookshop. There's another bookshop in Notting Hill, which I can't remember. It's got like a really... It's got a name that I keep forgetting. And then there's also Watkins in Soho as well. It's a spiritual shop that stocks it. But yeah, Amazon is one where you can just get the book. Yeah.
I love that copy.
Do you?
Yeah, I love it.
Me too. It's the best. I have like talks and stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Gia, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
And you too. Thanks, Veronica. It's been so fun.